Hi, this is Nir Ayal, and welcome to part 5 on how to become indistractable. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about the workplace. How can you make your workplace indistractable? We know that today's modern workplace is a hotbed of distraction. Not only the pings and dings we get from all of our devices, like our computers, our phones, well, what about our colleagues tapping us on the shoulder? It's a constant source of potential distraction. So, how do we deal with distraction in the workplace? Well, we need to recognize that first and foremost, distraction is a sign of dysfunction. That this is not something that is caused by our devices, as we've seen in previous episodes, that in fact, distraction begins from within. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it about the modern workplace that's causing so much distraction? What is this greater dysfunction? Well, it turns out studies find that there is a confluence of two factors that when people experience these two factors in their jobs, this has been shown to lead to symptoms of depression and anxiety disorder. And these two conditions are workplace environments with high expectations coupled with low control. High expectations and low control, when there's that mismatch, this is where we get into all kinds of problems. By the way, if you have high expectations with high control, that's no problem. People can rise to the occasion. So when we have high expectations with low control, this is when we get into states that can lead to symptoms of depression and anxiety disorder. And what do people do when they feel anxious? What do they do when they feel depressed? As we talked about earlier in the episode on internal triggers, those uncomfortable emotional states cause them to look for distraction. Let me just send my colleagues an email so that I can get stuff off my plate. Let me call a meeting that doesn't need to be called just so I can feel better, so I can have some sense of agency and control. And what this leads to is this very destructive cycle of responsiveness. That when people feel like they have high expectations coupled with low control, this is the type of workplace environment that when we add technology to this type of dysfunctional workplace environment, it gets this flywheel effect where people are constantly pinging and dinging each other, calling for superfluous meetings, sending emails that didn't need to be sent. This is what perpetuates this constant cycle of responsiveness. But we really need to realize that the technology is the vehicle for all this distraction, but it is not the source of the problem. That fundamentally the source of the problem is a bad workplace culture. That we have to fix distraction by fixing company culture. We need to give people the understanding that their voice matters, that they have some agency and control over the work they do, so that it's not something that's not in their control, that we have to give them a greater sense of agency. And if you're suffering from this, if you find that in your work environment, you are constantly distracted, don't suffer in silence. This is something that needs to be brought up with management. If you are in management, it's something that you have a lot more control over, and so it's something I encourage you to do something about. Now, what do we do about it exactly? Well, there's all kinds of things that we can do to make an indistractable workplace, and it really boils down to these three fundamental elements. Number one, giving people psychological safety. Look, the fact of the matter is, if you can't raise your hand and say, hey, look, I am constantly distracted at work. I can't seem to focus. People are constantly interrupting me. That if you can't raise your hand and talk about the problem, that is the problem. The problem of distraction at work is that we can't talk about this problem of distraction at work. But when people can talk about this problem without fear of getting fired, without the fear of getting labeled as lazy or not a team player, if they can talk about this problem of distraction, we can solve this problem just like we solve any other problem. So it's really about fostering psychological safety, giving people the place to talk about their concerns is the second step. And then third, the final step is to make sure that leaders display what it means to be indistractable. That I see in far too many companies, including companies that have hired me to consult with them and teach them how to become indistractable. I get in to teach my workshop, and at the back of the room, guess who's on their phone? Guess who's checking their device in an inappropriate time? It's the big boss. It's the person who hired me is the one that's most distracted. Remember, culture is like water. It flows downhill. And so if you want to build an indistractable workplace, management needs to exemplify what it means to be indistractable. Show people how important it is to work in a focused manner, to be indistractable yourself. Now, in summary, we need to remember that distraction is a sign of dysfunction, that it is an issue of corporate culture, and culture is something that absolutely can change, and that we can build an indistractable workplace. In the next video presentation, we are going to be discussing how we can raise indistractable kids. Hope you'll tune in for that, and also follow me on LinkedIn or on my blog, nirandfar.com. Nir and Far is spelled like my first name, Nir, and far.com. Until then, stay strong and stay indistractable.